coloring books. Putting kids coloring books in here and making cute little designs for kids. Yeah. So all I need to do here is just put the hoop in. Now this is a special scanning frame that of course comes with the machine. And I don't want to be in anyone's way. Anyone can see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to make the machine, let's cancel that. Return. And all clear. Okay. So this is, I'm going to take it from right from the start. All right, so all I have to do with this one is I go into what's called my IQ Designer, and that is the digitizing part of the machine. And I just have to tell it to scan right here. So I'm just going to push that button. And if I have an image, a line design, or an illustration design, the image would be what I had talked about. If it was, you know, a very clean picture of something, it will turn it into an embroidery for me. This one is a line design, so I'm just going to touch line design. And then it walks me through all this. They're super intuitive, and they really, just in case you forgot how to do it, the machine will actually tell you what it wants. So it's telling me here what it wants me to do, and I'm just going to scan, and then it warns me. It says, hey, I'm going to move. Is that okay? And you say, okie dokie. And what it's doing here, the camera that is built into the machine, I'll keep my fingers out of there, you'll get a really good picture of my finger. It's going to scan the design that we have on the frame. And it does, generally it takes 3 passes so that it gets it in there and scans it really well. And these green things that are on there, they are just the magnets that are holding my piece of paper down. It's going to do one more pass, just to make sure it gets it all. And see, I have a little smiley face on the screen. He's happily doing his job. And voila. It has given me a complete picture of what is on my screen. So now what I can do, I will go in here and I can crop out what I don't want, because I don't want those magnets, right? So I will crop them out. And now I can just say okie dokie. And it has given me the design here. Now what I can do is I can then just push set, and I can make some further adjustments. I can change, if I want to, I can change the line to a satin stitch. In this case, because I'm going to print it out or stitch it out like Redwork, I don't want a satin line. I want a thinner line. I want just some back and forth stitching, right? A double stitch. So I'm just going to tell it that I want to change that to a double stitch. And this part actually right here, it lets me change the color of the thread that I'm using. And sometimes that is like, oh, what color do I want to use? It takes me longer to figure that out than it does to do the design. But this, what this does is if I'm doing a multi-part design where I have multiple layers, like let's say I was digitizing an applique on here where I would have multiple layers, I want to change the layer of each design so that I know which one I'm working on at a certain time. So you can just randomly choose a color, say okie dokie, and now it'll stitch out the design. But I want to get rid of that square around there, so I have an eraser over here, and I can just erase that line so it won't stitch out. I'm going to increase the size of my eraser so it doesn't take me forever. And we'll do round. This is a little bit easier if I'm sitting right in front of the machine, but you get the idea. I can take away all those. And if I'm not 100% certain I've got it all, I can zoom in so I can make sure that I have everything off there that I don't want to stitch out. And all I have to do then is say next. And then I can stitch it out. It's very simple.
And when you stitch it out, you can use a heavier thread too, so it shows up better.
So what I would normally do, when I stitch out something that's a quilt design, whether I'm doing edge to edge or I'm doing something that I want it to be quilted, I would actually stitch it out with cotton thread. So I would go and grab like a 30 weight cotton and stitch it out with that. Normally when I'm stitching out on embroidery, I will use a 40 weight thread, rayon or poly or whatever thread that I want to use as a normal embroidery. And they do, the poly and the rayon threads have that little sheen. You know, when you see a hat or an actual embroidery, it's got a little bit of sheen to it. That's where the rayon and the poly, they give you that little sheen. But if I want to stitch out something that's a matte finish, like on my quilt, if I want to quilt my quilt, then I want to use cotton. So I will just use cotton thread. what you need to make sure of is that you have the right needle in for that job. A lot of times I'm embroidering with a 7511 needle. If I'm going to stitch with my cottons, because they're heavier, I want to put like a 9014 in there to make sure that I have a big enough needle so that we don't get shredded thread, because that doesn't make anyone happy. Another thing with embroidery that I hadn't mentioned yet is, with the exception of when I'm doing something that I want double-sided, like my freestanding lace, or if I'm doing a towel where I want it both sides to be the same, you don't have to use the same thread in the top and the bottom unless you want it to be double-sided like my freestanding lace. Embroideries, you just use a bottom weight thread, bobbin or bottom weight thread, and it's a much lighter thread. So when you are embroidering, you have one thread in the bobbin, and then you just have to change your top threads. So every time a color changes, I don't have to change my top and my bottom thread, I just change my top thread.
Oh, because I've been doing towels and I use a bobbin thread all the time.
Well, you can if you don't care what it looks like, if it doesn't have to be double-sided. A lot of times when I'm doing a towel, I want it to be the same on both sides.
So I can use a different, a regular embroidery thread on the bottom?
Yes, you can. Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And when I'm quilting, I use a cotton top and bottom.
Yes, well that's
Right,
what I'm
so-
doing for the edge to edge.
Yes. Yep. Any questions on that? And you're like, oh, ooh.
Cool.
That is so cool. So this is how Marg created her quilt. Pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only thing is I found that the scanning didn't pick up the dots on the eyes.
Right.
But what I did in the end, I just went into my alpha, picked a period,
Yes.
and just
Yep.
shot it with
So-
the camera
so-
right on to put it in the position on top of the eyes.
Yep. And what we can do also, like Marg was saying, if it doesn't quite suit you, you've got lots of editing features to fix it. And the scanning camera that she's talking about, we're going to see that one in just a couple minutes.